Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about. Now, tonight's guest is rather unique. There won't be a lot of talking because he's a fantastic composer, musician, and I can say a lot of other things about him, but that will come out in the initial interview. We will talk some, and then he will play some music, and I'll get carried away because he's already played one song that reminds me of home, and he's just a fantastic musician, and I'm sure you'll appreciate what he will give to you this evening. And how are you, David?
I'm doing great, Don. Thanks.
Are you nervous? I am.
Oh, no.
You've been doing this a long time.
Well, I mean, they say that as long as that if you stop getting nervous for performances and stuff like that, you should give up playing music. I've heard that a number of times from people. I don't know. I think that's just something that people who get stage fright a lot say to be able to make themselves feel better about getting stage fright. But I get nervous. I especially get nervous if I'm playing for a very large audience. Like if there's thousands of people out there and I know that they don't know my music. I mean, maybe if I worked myself up, I could get nervous about the potential audience out there for this show. But yeah, I think if this was Saturday Night Live, I'd be crapping in my pants probably. But it isn't.
Show,
yeah, that's why I said crapping.
Okay. And I think I told you the other morning I was watching Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. And, she takes a break about halfway through her show, and then she plays some music interlude for a minute or so. And there you were. I says, goodness, he's coming on the show pretty quick here,
that. Yeah, that was good. It was a nice little...
So you play in other parts of the world too, don't you?
I do. I tour a lot all over North America and Europe, and mainly, but I've also been other places as well, Latin America and various parts of Asia, but mainly Northern Europe and North America.
Well, I
where they speak
appreciate your
English.
Condescending to come on cable access television.
Oh, it's not condescending. See, I'm famous around the world, but only among dozens in any given town. So it's like it's not quite famous enough to go to my head or get rich or afford health insurance or anything like that.
Yeah. So I'll ask you some of my basic questions about who you are so the audience will get an idea who you are personally.
Sure.
And why it is that you do the music that you do and other stuff like that. So your first name is David Rovics. Is that a middle name?
Rovics is my last name.
And
yeah.
Do you have
middle name Stefan. Yeah.
Stefan.
Yeah.
How'd you get that middle name?
My father was... his mentor and teacher, for a long time, was a composer named Stefan Volpe, who, so I was named, my middle name came after him.
Okay. Yeah. And if I were to ask your best friend, who is David Rovics, what would your best friend say?
Who is David Rovics? Gosh, I don't know. I guess it probably depends on at which point in my life the best friend might be from, which phase might that have been? I don't know. What would my best friend say?
If you had a best friend,
who is David
I would
Rovics?
ask your best friend, who is David Rovics? What would that best friend say?
I suppose, I don't know, left-wing musician, nice guy. Hopefully.
That's what I want. Yeah. I should have warned you, I always have a trick question.
Oh, that's good. I like it. Yeah, that's good.
And when and where were you born?
Born in 1967 on April 10th in Manhattan, in New York City.
New York.
Yeah.
And did you live there a long time?
No, I think it was before I was 3. We moved to Connecticut to the suburbs, to Wilton, Connecticut, where I really spent my entire youth.
Mm-hmm. Anything significant about your cultural heritage that's worth mentioning? Or you just
probably. I mean, I think everybody's cultural heritage is worth mentioning. It's cultural heritage is just really fascinating. Period. I think sure. It's and this country is a fascinating country in terms of cultural heritage. I mean, not just, I don't mean that, in a unique sense, but I mean, settler countries are very interesting places in that, of course, 98% of the population of the U.S. Is not native to this, country, and we all came from somewhere else, and my history, my fairly recent ancestors, span everywhere from Minsk to Ireland and most areas in between, it seems. I mean, I'm a real mutt, a serious pan-European mutt.
Yeah.
Half my father's family is they're all from Eastern European Jewish refugees from the 1890s. Mm-hmm. And I know my mom's side, it's a combination of Irish peasants and English aristocracy.
What a combination, huh?
Yeah.
Do you have a religious preference?
A religion? No, I'm an atheist. Well, yes, I do. I'm an atheist.
An atheist, huh?
Yeah.
I'm atheist. I always have fun with that. When I say to a person, when they ask me that question, I say, well, I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
And they look at me kind of funny.
It's not really a religious preference so much as a non-preference, I suppose.
An atheist is a pejorative. I'm an atheist, a humanist.
Yeah, I'm a humanist, but I'm not a believer in any any religion or in the notion of God or heaven or hell or any of that stuff. I think it's all nonsense.
Did you ever have that kind of a belief when you were growing up? Did you belong to a regular religion?
No, I didn't. I never did. My parents, being sort of Jewish and Christian background mix, and both having not much interest in religion, it was just never an issue. And when I was 10, my mother started attending a Quaker meeting, but Quakers are not known, for being particularly proselytizing sorts. So I think she insisted that we come once and see what it was like. And that was, and we did, but that was the extent of her. I mean, she would hint now and then that maybe you want to come to a meeting, but we didn't, and we had no encouragement from our dad, who never went. So it wasn't like a family thing to do. So much as just something Mom did.
So how about your formal education? Did you go to school?
I did. I went to school. I went to a little bit of college. I graduated from high school, though. What saved me, I think, really was, in so many ways, is going to a sort of private hippie elementary school called the Learning Community, because public school, which I was in when I was like 5, 6, was just doing terrible things to me. So it was. I went to this private school that I'll always be thankful for, and then I was thrown into the public school system, which really sucked. And but I was older by then, so it didn't suck as bad as it would have if I was younger. And I had some real interesting few months in college before I dropped out, became a full-time musician, pretty much.
Why do you say public schools sucked for you?
For me, it sucked, and I'm not saying that public school always sucks, but for me, it sucked, and I think they do suck generally throughout the country. I mean, for all the hardworking good people who are involved in the public schools, they just are woefully underfunded and overcrowded, and they have a lot of other problems along with that too. But I think yeah, it's certainly not a universal problem on the planet as a whole, but in this country we just don't fund the schools, and that was true, I think, even in the well-off suburb where I went to school. It just wasn't seen as a high priority, and teachers were not seen as important people in society either. I mean, it was business executives was all that mattered in the town I grew up in. I don't know if it's like that everywhere, but certainly teachers were considered to be almost like there was a real class system, and teachers were some were just above garbage men in terms of the attitude that the rich have about teachers. They're people that didn't succeed at whatever they wanted to do, and so then they went to teaching.
And why do you think the society or the culture functions that way, such that teachers are looked down upon or not recognized for the value they are to the community? Why is that in our society?
I wonder where it all comes from. I don't know, but probably I I think part of it has to do with that they're underpaid and that they're working for a government entity of some kind. And we live in a society that has such a negative view of anything that the government tries to do, you know. And it's very, very different in Europe, you know. And then that's where I'm more familiar with in terms of like if to make any comparisons. So I could try to make comparisons with other places, but I wouldn't know what I was talking about. But in Europe, I do, and it's very different in Europe. People have a real respect for people who do things like teach or social work or you know, working with drug addicts or working with children, you know, or special needs or any of that. I mean, it's like it's totally. It's looked on as a necessity and an honorable thing to do that should be well paid, and it is, you know. I mean, compared to here, you know, and I think the attitude there too. I mean, much of Europe around business people and people who are trying to make a lot of money is also very different than the attitudes people have here. You know, people have a much more. They're not everybody, but of course it tends to be more support for that sort of thing. Like they think that's really cool. Like that's oh, he's really succeeded. You know, I think in Europe they tend to have a very different idea about success. Also, a very different idea of like if you're on welfare or something like that. That's not something to be ashamed of in much of European society. That's just how life goes. You know, when you are in between jobs, sometimes for a few years or something. You know, it's just a whole different attitude. You know, it's hard to.
Someone said that the Europeans tend to have more a sense of social responsibility than we do in this country.
Yeah, in a sense that they're in this one society together, and so everybody has their role to play in society. Like it's a bit more of a like society first, individual second kind of attitude, whereas here it tends to be the reverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a partner?
Yeah.
Wife, boyfriend, girlfriend?
Wife when she's from Japan, where they really put the group before the individual, much more than in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And any children?
And yeah, and a little 6-year-old girl named Layla.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And how do they handle you being away so much?
Well, it's a tough job for. I mean, there's pros and cons, you know, to any kind of job. But you know, most people working full time, they see their kids maybe for a little while in the evening and on the weekends. And for me, I see her like most of the time when I'm home and none of the time when I'm away. You know? So it's a different kind of thing. But I feel like we have a lot of good time together, and then they also come join me on the road for usually like 3 weeks in the fall and 3 weeks in the spring, and so it turns out like I'm on the road about half the year, and they're with me for, you know, a pretty good proportion of that time. So I end up, you know, managing to spend a good majority of the year overall with my family, you know, yeah, whether at home or on the road. So they're coming to join me in Europe. I leave for Europe next week, and I'll be there for 2.5 months, and they'll be joining me for 3 weeks in the middle of it.
You like your traveling?
Yeah, I do. I really enjoy it most of the time. But at the same time, it's definitely a job. And like, you know, sometimes I'll take gigs that are free, especially if it's near home. And then I'll be thinking, well, you know, during the drive, you know, gosh, you know, this is really taking up a whole bunch of time. And I'll start getting negative attitude about it. But when the gigs are paying and when you know, you're making a living at it, then it's fun, you know, because I know that the alternative is, you know, having a more typical job of some kind, and I have no idea what that would be, but I know I'd enjoy it less than I enjoy touring, much less, I think.
And your music and your compositions and what you're about is of supreme importance as far as I'm concerned. So that probably gives you a great deal of satisfaction beyond just having a job and earning a living, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's another component, a big one, you know. I mean, if I were doing music that weren't political, you know, I think I might enjoy doing music for a living anyway, you know. But the fact that I have things to communicate that I think are really relevant and that move people in different ways, if you can believe your email, you know, I feel like it's important work to be doing for me and for anybody else doing, you know, good political music. I think it always had a good role to play in society, and it certainly does now. And so I think, yeah, it's important work to be doing. And so that gives me a lot more, of feeling like this is something I should be doing, and it makes it more fun too.
Sure. My next question, I think, I don't need to ask it because it's coming out so far. It's about your political persuasion. Do you see yourself on the left or the right or the center or over the edge or what?
Yeah, somewhere over the edge, maybe.
Over the edge.
No, definitely on the left. Very much on the left. I would say, in the somewhere in the. I like Noam Chomsky uses the term libertarian socialist, and I like that very much. Although I tend to just say I'm somewhere on the left, but when pressed for something, a more specific definition of my kind of left, I would say definitely libertarian socialist.
I like that. I've never heard that before, and I love Noam Chomsky, of course.
Yeah. It's kind of like anarchist, except without the stigma. Or without as much stigma, libertarian socialist. It's very much depending on how you define socialism or anarchism or libertarianism. I mean, it's all a matter of how you define these things. But
sure, it's like benevolent socialism, or the kind of socialism practiced by the Germans in Germany during Hitler's era, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics.
Yeah, lots of different. Of course, with Hitler's socialism, you have to put National Socialism before it, right? So then that's a very specific kind of. But of course, that's. I don't think he was a very good socialist, really. By I think anyone's definition.
What's wrong with America today?
Well, I mean, I would say fundamentally getting down to, the most fundamental thing that's wrong with America today is that it's not a democracy, and the democratic deficit is what is ruining this country. If we had a real thriving multi-party democracy where money plays very little role, and where people's views are what really matters, and where there's a real thriving public and private and alternative media to cover these views, and if we had if we had democracy more in the way that they have democracy in many European countries, we would have a different society. We would be more like Europe. And because what we have is a high tech, very prosperous society that's completely controlled by corporations, and so it has a lot of the trappings of sort of European style democracy without the democratic part. And if we could get money out of politics and we can have more than two parties, then we might actually be able to do something like gut the military budget, for example, which is absolutely what needs to happen. I mean, it should be reduced by about 99% to get the U.S. more in line with the rest of the world in terms of military spending, and in order to then be able to use. I mean, we pay more tax in this country than they do in Japan. And it's fairly well known in this world and in this country that the Japanese educational system and the Japanese transportation infrastructure is miles beyond anything that we have in this country. And yet, we pay more tax. And what are we getting out of it? We're getting bombs, that sit on a shelf somewhere, or that go kill, people in Iraq or Afghanistan. We're not getting anything there that we should be getting for it. And the reason why is because we have two parties, both of which support massive military state, and we have nobody else to vote for that has any chance of winning. So that's our problem, basically, a lack of democracy.
Mm-hmm. What do you like about our country?
A lot of things. I mean, that this is there's 300 million people in this country, and they are from all over the world, and that's one of the things I like the most about it. It's a profoundly diverse society in every sense of the word, and more than probably anywhere else in the world that I've spent any time, and it's a fantastic place in terms of, like, it's attracted so many people from so many places for such a long time. You have so many generations of people from so many different places. It's a fantastic that makes it a wonderful place, despite the government. You know, and I love it here. Actually, I really, you know, despite the government, despite the media. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want to live in, you know, Okima or something, but you know, there's a lot of great places to be here, and a lot of great people, and then, you know, just things that you wouldn't even know about unless you traveled outside the country much, like things like community television and community radio. They don't have that in Europe, and I don't think they have it in most of the world either. You know, but they have it here, and of course it's always under attack in one form or another. But it exists, and it's a very important part of a certain, you know, it's an important part of the culture here, or at least some bunch of subcultures here. You know. And there's so many things. I mean, also it's stupendously beautiful. I mean, this is paradise. You know, and we're doing a great job at destroying it, but there's still a lot of beautiful places left. I mean, if somebody had the forethought a long time ago to start the national park system, and it's just amazing. And it takes up a significant amount of the land area. If you look at a map, I mean, you know, there's places the size of some countries that are just a park. You know. I mean, Yellowstone, there's a great reason to like this country. You know?
So, you know, you're so interesting in your travels and stuff, and there's such depth to your answers to my questions. We could go on forever talking, but we need to get some music in here along the way also.
Sure.
So, one more question. Where is this beautiful experiment called America going to be 20 years from now, if it continues going in the direction it's going right now?
Where are we going to be in 20 years?
Yeah.
If it continues going, I mean, you know, there are different forces at play here, you know.
Yes,
so,
yes.
I mean, I'd say history, if you're going to sum it up, you know, and in one basic idea, you know, how history is made, you know, it's to a huge extent, you know, there are the forces that are at work that make things happen are, you know, if you really boil it down, the haves and the have-nots, who are both trying to have more, and and that is that conflict has characterized human civilization for the past 5,000 years or so, and it continues to characterize how things happen here. So what things will be like in 20 years if the Occupy movement grows to be 1,000 times at the size that it is now, and we have a mass movement that's bigger than anything that we've seen in the past 100 years. If that happens, you know, and that's a big if. If that happens, then we'll have socialism in the United States in 20 years.
Socialism,
sure.
My gosh!
Oh, yeah. But if that doesn't happen, and if things keep on going the way they are, with Citizens United, and with the you know, the decision, the Supreme Court decision, and with you know, the increasing stratification of wealth in this country, you know, then what it's going to be like in 20 years? We're gonna have the rich will be richer, the poor will be even poorer. You know. There will be more gated communities, and there will be millions more people living on the streets, and everything is going in the wrong direction if we're not saved by some social movement.
I'm a democratic socialist, and I've got to stop now because we can go on talking forever and ever because your answer is always so interesting and intriguing.
Should I sing a song?
Yes, let's do it. And perhaps the song you're singing may provoke another question or some more discussion. Shall we do that?
Oh, sure.
All right.
Well, here's my song for the Occupy movement. I did a tour last fall that included 25 or so concerts at different Occupy sites around North America. Yeah. This is where they buy the politicians, because this is where power has its seat, because 99% of us are suffering at the mercy of the madmen on the street, because all of us are victims of class warfare being waged on us by the 1%, because these greedy banksters rub the country, leaving us without the means to pay the rent. Because the last time that we had a decent government,
was about 1932. Because we the people are supposed to run this country, but instead it's all run by and for the few. Because now we know the rich do not pay taxes, but when they need a hand, it's us who bail them out. Because we suspected we lived in a plutocracy, but suddenly of late there is no doubt. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because both my parents lost their savings. Because I have never opened an account. Because the interest on my credit card just doubled, and now I can't pay the minimum amount. Because these budget cuts are just immoral, with our schools as overcrowded as they are. Because there are no buses where I live, but I can't afford to drive a car. Because so many of us don't have health insurance. The rest of us have it, but it sucks. Because the rich are flying in their private jets, while the rest of us are slogging through the muck. Because capitalism isn't working. This system has just failed to produce. Because the 1% are prospering, while the rest of us just suffer their abuse. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because it has been demonstrated amply that the winners are the ones who stick around. Because this world should belong to everyone, not just the banksters who would smash it to the ground. Because we've noticed voting doesn't change things when the politicians are mostly millionaires. Because we're learning how to stand up like Tunisians, like they did in Tahrir Square, where a young man named Mohammed Bouazizi struck a match that lit up all the earth. And all around the world the spell was broken, and a movement for the future was in birth. Because there's only so much crap the rich can feed us before we figure out which side we're on. Because we've learned if we want our liberation, it will only come if we stay here till the rising of the dawn. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because corporations are not people, and we can't just let them choose. Because if we leave our fate to them, then all of us will surely lose. Because the climate clock is ticking, and we can't just leave our world behind. Because corporate rule isn't working, and it's time for humans' hearts and minds. Because you can't take it with you. Because the rich just do not care. Because it doesn't matter how much you make, but how much you can share. Because these moments don't come often. Because we want truly to be free. Because we know what really matters. Something called society. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here.
Oh my God.
You've heard that one before, I think.
Yeah, but it's different being here in your presence and hearing it in person and listening carefully to the lyrics.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Ah, my gosh, that says it all. It's so powerful.
No, thank you.
And the kind of response you get when you play it out in the world.
Uproarious. Especially at the Occupies. I mean, it's the Occupy movement has. I mean, I haven't sung that song outside of the U.S. or Canada yet because I only just wrote it in October, but and I haven't been on tour in Europe since last September. But it was when you really kind of sum up where people are coming from in some situation, when you hit it on the nail, because people just go nuts. People love to have their story told in a way that really says what they're saying, and I know it's what they're saying because I wrote this. I didn't write the song from my own head so much as I mean, of course they all come out of my head, but every one of those becauses are some sign that somebody had. It's not. This is not just me talking here. This is. I research my songs.
What a marvelous creativity. But I've got a sign from the control room saying they're going to thump on me if I don't take a break. Don't look at me, Sean. So let's take a couple minutes break, and then we'll come back and talk some more and play some more music. A couple of panels up there to break to. Yeah. Okay, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there, and like my guest tonight, David Rovics, about whatever it is we've decided to talk about. And we're going to talk about David's music and how he has decided and why he's decided to write the music and his adventures and travels. And I'm just so turned on to, before the break, the song we played, we're going to stay right here, is still bouncing around in my head. So I've got to stick to my script. It was just so great, yeah. So let's continue on some more. And you want to play another song now, and then we'll talk about something between then, or you want to...
Either way, sure. Yeah.
All right, play something else right now.
I'll play the most recent thing I wrote. I wrote it last Sunday. And
Sunday.
Yeah, well, Saturday and Sunday, but I finished writing it on Sunday.
That is phenomenal.
Oh, I got the lyrics right here. I haven't learned it yet. Hatter Adnan grew up near Jenin City. You could say he was a product of his time. Ever since he was a kid, he'd get arrested, though he was never charged with any crime. Spending half his life in prison, a life lived like so many of his friends. Arbitrary and indefinite detention, never knowing when your jail time would end. Hatter Adnan was arrested last December. Again, he wasn't told the reason why. He was shackled, he was beaten, he was tortured. There beneath the Middle Eastern sky,
Perhaps there was a moment when he realized that right then, with his body, he'd say no. But from then on, he refused to eat another meal, like in Belfast not many years ago. Khader Adnan grew up in a war zone, but all the tanks and planes were only on one side. It was a type of war that they call occupation, settlement, removal, fratricide. And anyone who talked about resistance, who thought they did not deserve to be a slave, would be looking down the barrel of a gun and often find themselves inside an early grave. Khader Adnan loves his wife and daughters, and he likes to eat his daily bread. But in prison, he can't see his children or live life with the lady that he wed. So on behalf of all the children without fathers, he decided he had to strike a blow. He said, I will have dignity or death, like in Belfast not many years ago. Each time Khader Adnan was arrested, in prison he would learn a little more. And soon he became the teacher. And he'd talk about the times that came before. They talked about civil disobedience. They talked about the ballot and the gun. They talked about the occupied 6 counties and the H blocks in 1981. Khader Adnan talked of perseverance and how someday their people might be free. How someday they might hear their children laughing, unafraid how someday things could be. And then at 3:30 on one morning, the soldiers came, their rifles pointed low, and they took Khader Adnan from his family, like in Belfast not many years ago. They say Khader Adnan is a terrorist, just like they said of Bobby Sands, because he dares speak out against injustice, because he dares to make a stand, because he dares believe that he is human, and he does not deserve to live this way, because he dares to consider an alternative, because he dares imagine a new day. Khader Adnan lost his liberty before he was born. To fight for life, it's death he must embrace. But just like others come before him, there are others waiting to take his place. And even the great powers can lose interest in supporting such a vicious status quo, because you can't break a man who won't be broken, like in Belfast so many years ago. Like in Belfast not many years ago.
And in what country was this?
Khader Adnan is a Palestinian who's he's serving, well, he's arrested, I think, 9 times in the past 6 years, and every time with no charges filed, and then every time held for at least 6 months in what they call administrative detention, yes, which is when you're held without trial indefinitely. Every 6 months they can renew your sentence, you know, or lack of a sentence or whatever, and some people are in there for upwards of 5 years with no charges. Why
are they arresting him repeatedly?
Because he's Palestinian. And really, that's what they do to Palestinians. That's what they do to any young Palestinian man, and also sometimes, you know, women and elderly and children as well. Lots of children. They have thousands of children in their prisons. But you know, if you're a young man and you're Palestinian, you know, you are going to be arrested and you know, or shot. But and certainly in his case, he's much more likely to be arrested because he's an outspokenly political young man.
And the people doing the arresting?
Oh, the Israeli military.
Yeah.
Although he might have been arrested by the Palestinian Authority as well, because there's been a certain amount of conflict between factions. And he's a member of one of the factions that tends to get arrested by everybody, which is Islamic Jihad.
What's going to happen in between with Israel and Palestine?
I think the only solution is ultimately really, going to have to come from the United States deciding that it doesn't want to sponsor Israel to do whatever horrible things it wants to do. In the case, and I was just reading something that Ali Abu Nima, I think it was Ali Abu Nima, who wrote this essay where he was talking about the similarities and the differences between Israel and Palestine and Britain and Northern Ireland. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of similarities, and there's also a lot of differences. And one of the chief differences is that Britain decided ultimately by 1993 or so, at least, that they no longer wanted to sponsor the obviously sick state of affairs in the loyalist-run 6 counties of Northern Ireland, and that they wanted there to be some kind of actual settlement that people could live with, and so so there was a peace process that was actually successful, and you now have a situation where there's still lots of problems, but you don't have a civil war going on, and you have real power sharing, and you have Sinn Féin sharing power with the UDP, which is like the moral equivalent of Hamas sharing power with Likud, which seems unimaginable, but they're doing it in Northern Ireland, and but it's never going to happen in Israel-Palestine until the U.S. stops sponsoring Israeli terrorism, and ultimately, because these solutions, when you're talking about small countries with small populations with big conflicts going on in important regions of the world like that, the solution ultimately probably doesn't actually lie from within the country, which is a very sad thing to say, because you don't want to deny the the power of the local people to deal with their situation. But actually, this is an international conflict that the United States is very much involved with, and just like with the Lebanese Civil War, there was no Lebanese solution to the Lebanese Civil War. When you got Israel, Syria, and the United States all supporting different factions, there's no local solution. The solution has to be between the United States, Syria, and Israel in that particular case.
Someone suggested that Israel is really the U.S.'s 51st state. It's an extension of American power and American hegemony and the American empire, and Israel is the center of control of the entire Middle East and North Africa. Israel.
Well, that I wouldn't say that, but I would say it's a more nuanced and dynamic relationship between all the different countries involved. I don't think that Israel is actually the 51st state in the sense that they do everything the U.S. tells them to do. I think they are sponsored by the U.S., and they probably do a lot of things that the U.S. would rather they didn't do, But the U.S. has decided for quite a long time that they are sponsoring Israel to do whatever they want. Even if they have disagreements, they're never going to back down from paying for them to do their dirty work. And so, but Israel, I don't think, especially now after the Arab uprisings, I don't think Israel calls any shots in that region. They have suddenly found themselves without nearly as much power as they had 1 year and 3 months ago.
If Iran is attacked, will it be Israel's initiative, or will it be Israel doing it with the U.S.'s agreement?
I suspect that, from what I hear, if they attack Iran, it will be an Israeli initiative. I don't know how much support they have from the U.S. to attack Iran. I'm sure that they have support from various elements of the ruling class here. Absolutely, they do. But whether that's something that the administration currently seriously wants to do, I don't think so. But then if Israel does it, I'll bet the United States will just support them full tilt. Even though they may have just gone there to Israel to a few days ago to talk to the people in power to tell them we'd rather you did not bomb Iran right now, and maybe be in some back room they had much stronger words than that for them. I don't know, but the thing is that I think Israel has a real habit of completely ignoring American requests,
UN resolutions,
they certainly ignore UN resolutions, but they also even ignore like members of the Bush administration. I mean, they've done things like, well, I can't remember. I mean, sometimes they do things that clearly seem to be just to upset certain people in the U.S. and just show them, look, we can do whatever we want, and you just can't stop us. Because I mean, even sometimes, there's been cases, I can't remember, some high up Bush administration person going there, and while he was there, they bombed Gaza. It's like, you're supposed to wait until I leave. We're talking about peace here. You don't bomb Gaza while I'm here. They're just completely out of control.
Is there a chance that there can be a moderate sort of government in Israel instead of the hardliners now?
Well, the thing about it that I say, like, that probably there's only hope for a solution is external. The reason I say that is because I've been to Israel and also to Palestine, but which is wherever the border is, who knows? No, the Israelis certainly don't know. But the thing is that the society is huge. Numbers of people in the society are really racist, supporters of apartheid. It's very much like
Middle East apartheid.
Yeah, the Israeli apartheid, and that's what they're running, is an apartheid state. Again, I mean, the Palestinians are, and it's a multi-tiered apartheid state, much like South Africa. You have the Israeli Jews, and within the Israeli Jews, you have apartheid. Of a much more subtle form, but definitely you have a lot of discrimination against like Ethiopian Jews or dark-skinned Jews. But basically, just that notwithstanding, you basically have Israeli Jews, and then you have Palestinians who are categorized in the Israeli mind in different ways, depending on whether they're Christian or Muslim, and also more importantly, depending on whether they live within Eretz Israel, within the 1948 borders, or whether they live in the West Bank and Gaza. If they live in the West Bank, then they're like third-class citizens, as opposed to the second-class citizens of people who live in places like Nazareth and the so-called Arab Christian villages of Israel, who they call the Arab Christians, so they never call them Palestinians.
I'm going to come back as a Labrador Retriever in my next life. I don't want to be a human being anymore.
It's much simpler, much simpler.
But David, before we started, you were playing a song that reminded me of my home in New Orleans. Something about Lake Pontchartrain.
The Lakes of Pontchartrain.
Will you play that?
Sure. I've just been spending the winter sort of learning songs that I used to sing. I don't know. This was written a long time ago. I think it's anonymous. Nobody knows the author. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was Irish, anyway. It was one fine March morning, and I bid New Orleans adieu. I rode the rods to Jackson Town, my fortunes to renew. I cursed all foreign money, no credit could I gain, which filled my heart with longing for the lakes of Pontchartrain. I stepped on board a railway car beneath the morning sun. I rode the rods till evening, and I lay me down again. All strangers there, no friends to me, till the dark girl towards me came, and I fell in love with a Creole girl by the lakes of Pontchartrain. I said, "You pretty Creole girl, my money here's no good. If it weren't for the alligators, I'd sleep out in the wood.
You're welcome here, kind stranger. Our house is very plain, but we never turn a stranger out by the lakes of Pontchartrain. She took me to her mama's house, and she treated me there quite well. The hair all about her shoulders and jet black ringlets fell. To try and paint her beauty, I'm sure 'twould be in vain. So handsome was my Creole girl by the lakes of Pontchartrain. Her would she marry me, and she said that never could be, for she had got a lover and he was far at sea. She promised she would wait for him, and true she would remain, waiting for her sailor on the lakes of Pontchartrain. So it's fare thee well, my bonny old girl, I never may see you more. But I'll never forget your kindness at the cottage by the shore, and at each social gathering a flowing glass I'll drain, and I'll drink a health to my Creole girl by the lakes of Pontchartrain.
I will play that again and again and again, because my viewers know that I'm from Lake Pontchartrain, from New Orleans, and I was back being a little boy again on the shores of Lake Pontchartrain, and I also went back to where I was almost drowned in Lake Pontchartrain in the 30s. Mm-hmm. But then I went back to the enjoyable experience of the warm breeze blowing off the lake, and my older brothers catching shrimp, and those was a long time ago. But we're going to make things that way in the future when we stop the advance of the American empire.
That's
and
right.
Return America.
The oil industry.
Yeah. Well,
especially the oil industry. If we want those fish to come back, so you can't have the sort of the fish breadbasket of the region, you know, be also the oil drilling home of, you know, it's just not working out very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts that you could share with the audience that they'd be curious about in your travels and your experiences? Like you mentioned a little in the Mideast when you were in Palestine and Israel, and you've been in New Orleans, have you?
Oh yeah, lots of times. Yeah, many times.
And any other countries you've been to, parts of the world that you make a comment about that you enjoyed?
Well, you know, I have a great time everywhere I go, really. But I guess what was the single place that really stands out in terms of like what it's advertised as and what it actually is. And what a vast difference there is between the two is Mexico City. I mean, you know, all you hear about Mexico City outside of Mexico City, all you hear about it is, oh, it's such a massive place, so many people, so polluted, so much crime. Well, you know, I guess maybe all those things are true, but all I saw of the week I spent in Mexico City was one of the most beautiful, artistic places on earth. And you know, the architecture, the parks, the museums, the culture, everybody from all over Latin America is there. You know, not just Mexico, everywhere. They're all there, you know, creating great art and music. And I mean, it's an amazing, vibrant cultural capital, really. But there's so many other wonderful places in the world. My favorite place in the world is always wherever there's a big demonstration happening. I mean, that's always the best place to be. And in Mexico City, that's every day. So they have an average of 8 per day, and they're big. I mean, you know, I mean, you had 6 months of 100,000 people camped out in front of the Zócalo, in front of the presidential palace, you know, trying to, you know, chant that, you know, down the government, and you know, when they had a fraudulent election like some years ago. I mean, it's an amazingly dynamic society, you know.
Good.
And artistic.
We're going to have you come on again.
Love to come back.
It's close to time for us to stop visiting and get ready to say goodnight. And keep those pens and pencils handy, because you may want to jot down something that will show you in the closing credits. I want you to give us feedback, both positive and negative, about any aspect of the show. And I mean it. It helps us to give you a better show in the future. And now a few public service announcements. And they're waving a sign to me. I want to tell you about the local broadcast schedule. Can you put that panel up, please? To get the Dr. Don local broadcast schedule, go to my website, www.donbaham.com, and click on Present Day Activities. The next panel you can put up for me, a public service announcement, is to watch Dr. Don local broadcast. There it is, to watch Dr. Don on the web. Go to my website again and click on favorite links. And you can see, a couple hundred shows that I've produced over the years on that location. One more public service announcement before they shut me down. To learn more about the ACLU, I'm going to tell you, the American Civil Liberties Union.
That's good.
The ACLU has done a couple of things over the years that have upset me a lot, but by and large, they're the best protector of our civil liberties, which are really in danger now with the present administration, the continuation of the Bush policies by Obama. And Obama's done some, well, next public service announcement. To get the Dr. Don shows broadcast by other stations. Yeah. Ask your local public access station to go to www.pegmedia.org, and they will tell you how to do it there. Thanks for watching, and remember, KFC, not that KFC, Dr. Don's KFC, kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too, and you, and you.